howdy, everybody. Thank you for joining us once again for another Hop Nerd replay. On today's episode, we are joined by the awesome Rob Fisher. Let's dive in. Welcome to the one and the only, the awesome Mr. Rob Fisher. How are you today, sir?
I am fantastic. COVID, another day COVID free.
There you go. I know that feeling. I've been fortunate enough here to get tested a couple times. I don't know if that's good fortune or bad fortune when they come at you with that Q-tip that's about as long as your arm. But I've been fortunate enough to at least be negative through most of that.
I think when I get back from this trip, I'll go get tested just for sanity.
That's what we were just talking kind of before we started. That's actually what I'm planning on doing, is going and getting tested. I live around the corner here in Phoenix from ASU, and they're doing these kind of pop-in testing centers where you just drive through, and I'm probably going to do the same, because we were just sharing. I'd done a little flying before as well for some family stuff for a funeral, and Rob was just telling me he's getting ready to fly out to go do some stuff, and the airports they're interesting.
Yeah, well, I bolted awake, and you'll love this morning at 3:00, and the adrenaline was rushing. I turned 63 a few weeks ago. And late happy birthday. Let me say that late happy birthday. And on that day, my North Carolina driver's license expired.
Oh,
I haven't looked at my driver's license in years. So I didn't find out until we were trying to put some insurance checks in the bank, and the banker said, "Hey, your license is expired." Well, North Carolina's not issuing them right now. Yeah. And at that point, I wasn't thinking about getting on a plane.
Yeah.
And until after I got my license. But this morning, boom, upright. Said, I can't get on a plane. I can't rent the car when I get.
Oh, no. I didn't think about that.
I'm going to be out of control.
It's amazing how much stuff is dependent upon that one little plastic card. Yeah. I was thinking about that today because they, or just the other day talking about flying, because Arizona, you have to get the new, more secure driver's license, right? To
real ID.
Right, exactly. And so Arizona's been a little slower than some in rolling that out. And I've been even slower into actually going and doing it. So it's my laziness that's put me in this position probably more than anything else. But so they finally extended that, right? So they extended it a little bit with everything that's going on, but I've got to do the same. And the worst part in Arizona is driver's license don't expire for like life. So I think my expiration date on my current license that I got back in 15 or 16 or somewhere back in there, I couldn't even tell you, but the expiration date is 2053. So
wow.
Like, I don't want to have to do it. It doesn't expire until 2053. I'm too cheap to do that.
Yeah. You'll still be younger than me at that point.
Well,
we're going to get this guy to 2028. That's it.
Right. There you go.
It's like my dad. We're probably in some strange ground here, but my dad, when I think he was 81, his concealed carry permit in Texas was about to expire. This is something that ought to expire. Oh, no, son, I'm going to get it renewed.
Yeah. All right. You would think at that point you just keep it. It's good.
That's right.
The state would just be like, all right, it's for life. Don't worry about it.
Where are you going to hang it? On your walker?
Right. Well,
I've watched you try to walk.
That's what I'm saying. You put the permit on one side. Well, I guess it varies with what you're drawing in hand, but you put the permit on one side and you put the revolver on the other side of the walker, and you're getting right. Well, on that note, thank you for coming on. Let me say that.
You're welcome. Good to be here.
We were just talking. It's been too long. I've been excited to get you on, and finally did. We finally chatted a little bit the other day, and here you are. Before we go too much farther, I can't imagine that there's folks out there that don't know who you are, but would you give us a little introduction and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, sure. And thanks for having me on. I'm certainly going to try to get you on mine as well here in the very near future.
Sure.
My name's Rob Fisher. I own a company called Fisher Improvement Technologies. And we've spent the last 30 years helping organizations understand how and why people make mistakes, especially mistakes could be catastrophic, and how you can do one of three things. You can prevent the mistake, you can mitigate the consequences, or you can reduce the probability. And the people at the sharp end of the stick need to know how to do that. And the people that are leaders need to understand their role in that. So our company kind of focuses on the area of prevention, mitigation, elimination, and reduction. We also do effective incident analysis. How do you look at things after things happen? You guys call them learning teams. We've been doing facilitated improvement teams, same concept for a long time. And then effective written guidance. You can't throw all the rules away. So the ones that you do have to write down, the ones that people do have to follow, you better make them as good as they can be.
Right.
And those are kind of the three areas that we focus on in almost all high-risk industries.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That is awesome. I'm sitting here thinking, and that's the word that comes to mind when I think of Fisher Improvement is I think legendary, to be honest with you. That's kind of what I think about. Just as you said, you guys have been doing this for over 30 years. We were just chatting a little bit before we got started about my day job and some of the influence that you guys had at my current employer. Again, I won't talk about who I work for. People, it's easy enough for them to go find that out as they want to, but just the positive impact that your organization has had on, God, who knows how many, do you even know how many companies you guys have had a positive influence on?
We've done over 250 deployments.
Wow. That's amazing.
In 40 countries in 10 different languages.
Wow.
And we kind of stopped counting at about 300,000 students.
Wow. That's
so
amazing.
When you start moving to the workforce, I started looking at it the other day, and from a workforce perspective, from the worker, sharp end of the stick, probably 250,000 of those people have been frontline workers.
Wow.
All the rest have been advocates. We've got over 1,000 certified trainers globally.
Awesome. Yeah.
Probably 10 or 11,000 advocates that people go through 3 and 4 day workshops. Yeah. And that's all good. It just means we've been out there doing it. The thing that gets me is how well the process works to drive people that want to do something sustainably. I think it's kind of a testament. We don't get a lot of repeat business, and we don't get a lot of people shifting over to go somewhere else. In the end, what we do is pretty sustainable.
Yeah.
So but the other thing is, I've always tried to stay a little bit ahead of the curve. So, way back in the day, we started creating things that worked for people that weren't nukes and worked for people that weren't in a utility. So we kind of moved into industry and changed up some of the language and needs. And then the next thing we did was everybody said you need a systemic approach. So we created a system that people use. Then leaders need a system. So we created it. We've just tried to stay ahead of the norm. Right. Yeah. For our entire existence, really.
That's awesome. Well, and you're speaking my language, because I love when you kind of go down this place of so many organizations get so fixated solely on prevention, right? And you're talking so beyond just prevention, and we're acknowledging that prevention is good. Like, prevention is a great thing, but I'm really digging into that approach, because it seems like so many organizations get so fixated on prevention that it's almost it's almost detrimental, because we lose sight of the fact that our prevention strategies are probably going to fail at some point. And when they do, as you kind of mentioned, how do we have that on the backside of that to mitigate the outcome? And when you couple all that stuff together, kind of driving down that systems approach, we have kind of the full package now. We're not just relying on this, or we're not just relying on that. We kind of have more stacked, layered defenses there.
Yeah, so I think, years ago, I was one of the first people to say, well, I don't understand. Yes, human performance or hot tools are good for the end worker, and they need them, but it's still a final barrier tool.
Right, exactly.
So why would you invest all of your time and money on the belief that the final barrier tool is going to be any better than the final barrier?
Right.
But that's not to say you don't need them.
Yeah.
And they have to be good. So again, we kind of move things. I've been around so long that STAR, Stop, Think, Act, and Review, had a predecessor. Predecessor was called Split VAMO.
Really?
So it was a 7-step process.
Wow.
To do something the mind can only remember 5 of.
Right.
We were pretty sharp back then.
Yeah.
And then STAR came along, what we discovered probably 10 years ago, that the stop, think, act, review piece, the think piece had 3 or 4 steps. So when we shifted to verbalized, point, and touch, we had to then explain to people why we want them talking out loud. And again, it just took with people because now they understood the way the brain was working.
Right. Yeah.
And then you can backfill into the organization.
Yeah.
But I've always believed that the tools are necessary, but they're also the last thing you ought to roll out, not the first thing you ought to.
You're exactly. It's so interesting because we find so much in so many organizations that they want the tools, but they don't necessarily want all that legwork that goes up to how to use the tools properly and understanding the limitations of tools and understanding all that stuff, right? They want they want to take those bits and pieces that you can make really visible and useful in the organization, which they are very useful, as we kind of mentioned. They're amazing tools, but you got to have all that stuff really backing behind it to make all that work. Because if you just try to copy and paste those over, as some organizations do, not all, some, there's a few, right, that just try to go, okay, now we're going to use this and just plug that in. And then their mind is blown when it fails.
That's where the utilities got burned by the nukes.
Yeah.
You had a bunch of executives that came from the nukes, went into the utilities, said, put these human performance tools in,
and
hold people accountable for using them.
Yep.
Well, I mean, I did both of those strategies, but that wasn't the way it worked.
Right.
And you still have some people in the utility business today that think that if they just throw the tools out to the workforce, then they're going to get better performance. And the problem is they do a little bit. They get a little bump because some of the tools are fairly natural, right?
Right. Yeah. But exactly, it's what I've found so frequently with that, when that occurs, is that you end up really with weaponized human performance tools. It seems like, right? You end up in a position to where kind of going into cause analysis and stuff in those organizations that might have just kind of thrown those tools over and said, here you go, use them. Because on the surface, it might seem super simple that you can just take these and just tell people to use them and punish them when they don't, and hold them more accountable when they fail at using them.
Well, and not even just more accountable. Hell, they started shifting their root cause to say failure to perform an effective pre-task brief, failure to use STAR, failure to use the critical decision. What?
And then you're sitting there like bashing your head against the wall.
That's why my forehead is
no, right? You're going, no.
Yes.
And that's what I mean by that weaponized piece. Is we kind of we'll write that into those analysis, right? And those organizations will say, well, they should have just done a 2-minute drill harder or better, right? And that's again, it's back to that point of it's just not telling us anything, right? Because that's the way that I share it with people is they're human performance tools. And as with any tool, whether it's a screwdriver or a hammer, that we've got in their toolbox in the garage, they all have their specific uses and their specific limitations. And we have to understand that hammer, that screwdriver might fail at some point.
One of our mantras is, if you use the right tool the right way at the right time, that's when you get a factor of 10 reduction. Use the wrong tool, use it at the wrong time, the tool itself fails, or you don't use it right, you don't get the reduction. So that's a lot of things that have to come together. How does the organization prepare for task success?
Right.
And then let the tool be something that'll stop something from falling. It's the net on the outside of the scaffolding.
Right. Exactly. No, I love it. I think that's great because, again, I think that's one thing that I think people need to hear is that you really need to lay that groundwork, right? That you really need, you don't just want to go take tools off the shelf, basically, and just try to throw them into the organization. You really need to understand their uses, their limitations. You got to lay all that groundwork beforehand. And so I like the way that you put that the tools should probably be the last thing that you,
in fact, in our process,
roll out in the organization.
We have some interactions with senior leaders and managers, and there's a stop sign in our process. And I tell the leaders, that stop sign's for us or for you. You may get along down this road as a leader and go, it's not the way I want to go. That's fine. That stop sign's as much for us to say, these leaders are not changing their language. They're not changing their behaviors. They're not getting it. And I'm not putting our name at risk.
Right.
for a team that just wants it. And we lost a big contract last year because the senior leaders wanted somebody, and then they did it from outside to come in and just go around and teach all the tools to the workers. And I said,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a big contract, but I'm not doing something I know is going to fail.
Right. Right. And that's, yeah, exactly. Wow. And I mean, again, we see that pretty frequently. It's almost like they want that easy button. It seems like, it's okay, we put the
Yeah.
tools out and everything will be fine. And that's amazing. That's such an ethical testimony that you give there. I think that's so neat to hear, because
And
there's
here's
some
the sad
organizations
part.
out there that wouldn't turn that down,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and obviously there were.
Yeah, there's someone, something.
Yeah. A few of them actually, they lined
Yeah.
up. Uh, but
Oh,
the sad part is people so overcomplicate in their heads how difficult it is to do it right, and it's not.
yeah.
I mean, when you walk away and the leaders start changing their behaviors, and they have
Mhm.
a meeting with the union leadership, and it goes completely differently than it went 2 days ago,
Yeah.
and they start getting different inputs, and the engagement changes before they ever even roll out the tools.
Yeah.
It's amazingly simple. It's not chaotic or complex to start moving an organization down the path. But I think in people's heads, they just think it's going to be such a, and what we were talking about before, an
Yeah.
organization you're familiar with struggled with this.
Yeah.
It's going to be so
Right.
hard.
Right. Yeah.
The president's on. He's on every channel.
Yeah, yeah. I think the crazy part with that is, and because this is what I hear, and you probably hear, you probably, when I hear those things from that organization or any organization, I hear this. This is what plays in my head. I hear, we know that it's wrong, and we know that it doesn't work well, but it's ours, and we're going to keep doing it that way.
Yeah,
And I'm going,
exactly.
you know,
Let's give Mike a chance. He just
right.
got promoted to this senior leader
Yeah,
position.
yeah.
Let's give him a year to get his feet wet.
Right.
Meanwhile, they're not the ones that are out there getting hurt, maimed, and killed.
No, exactly. Exactly. And there's that struggle there, because when we're talking utilities and we're talking these high risk industries, we continue to really have fatalities at a pretty stable rate, unfortunately, right, through most organizations. And it seems like the kind of the normative approach for organizations is to just say, okay, well, we're just going to take what we've been doing and just do that a lot harder and expect to stop killing people. And it's back to that old saying, right? You're going to keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, is the definition of insanity, right?
Yeah.
And you got to do something a little different. You can't just take those normal approaches that, again, when we hear that, it's playing in our head going, oh, okay. But you got to take that and maybe do something a little different, huh?
Yeah. And so what I've been doing um, probably the last 10 years now is trying to shift the paradigm of leaders on that in particular.
Yeah.
Now, we have this whole part of our business that is not companies that have fatalities and serious injuries. But about 10 years ago, I sat on this board for this conference for fatality and serious injury elimination.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when we really discovered the data associated with everything else has gotten better and fatalities have plateaued.
Right.
So let's start looking at SIF, serious injury and fatality potential, or FSI, whatever companies call it,
Yeah.
and looking at it differently. First, we got people to try to manage the slice, convince them that the pyramid wasn't really a pyramid for them.
Yeah.
Then, and instead of just throwing out, the pyramid sucks, you can't use the pyramid.
Right.
I've always thought it's our job to take leaders on a journey that shifts their paradigm, instead of yelling at them that they're stupid for thinking that things are the way they were 40 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the one thing that I found to be, you're so spot on. You're so spot on, because I really appreciate that kind of generic adoption curve, where we really have the innovators and we have the early majority, late majority, and then you have kind of that laggard crowd. I've just seen that play out. And I'm sure you have too. You've seen that play out hundreds of times as you kind of do these deployments. I've really found in those, especially in those leaders, it seems like most of them are just kind of in that place. It seems like it's not a no, it's not a yes. It's just tell me more, make this make sense to me.
Yeah.
And I found that if you don't get, because you're dealing with a very particular personality, right? Especially when you're talking director and above, right? You're dealing with a very particular personality in these organizations. And I've just found that to where if you slip a book on their desk, or you send them a link to the Essential Leadership podcast, right?
Yeah.
You kind of feed them a little information. I've, I've just personally found that it seems like with most of those folks that they eventually come to the same conclusions that most of us would.
Yeah.
Right. So it's to your point exactly. As much as I love, and don't get me wrong, I love to bash the pyramid. I do. That's I love, at least on social media, I love to pick on the pyramid and
Yeah.
zero and all that stuff because it's fun and it's polarizing, right? But in that world, that's probably the last thing you'd actually want to do in an organization. You don't want to go out and make someone feel stupid because they're
Right.
not. Those folks are not stupid by any means.
Well, and
Right?
the other thing is, safety leaders that have been around for 20 years, they ain't gone yet.
No, absolutely,
So
exactly right.
you're telling them what that would be like telling an engineer that differential equations was taught wrong.
Right, right, yeah, right, yeah.
Because that's what they were. So you have to take them on that journey.
Yeah.
And for me, the development of that journey was both personal and professional.
Yeah.
I had to shift because it was what I was
Sure.
taught. But so what worked? And you were talking about the personalities. One of the biggest things that we've done in the last probably 5 years now is incorporate the personality tendencies into HOP.
Yeah.
I always thought that whether it was Myers-Briggs or Rock Run or DISC or Florence Littauer or Strength Finders, I always thought back in the old days that our personalities had something to do with how HP took or how HOP took.
Yeah.
I didn't know that Equilibrium was out there with 600,000 data points on how different people, different personalities get hurt, what makes it difficult to follow procedures, what makes it difficult to stop work. And even more important for me and us, how do I approach that individual in a leadership position
Right.
based on the way they need information, not the way I like to give it? So that's been a game changer.
And that's kind of where I was going to go next because that's one thing that you guys are doing that there's a lot that you guys are doing that's super unique, but that's one thing that is phenomenally different than most other organizations out there, right? And that's actually, so that's what I just did mine beforehand. I don't know if some people can see that. I've got my blue yellow, the socializing relator here and
Yeah.
in front of me because I hadn't done it yet. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I definitely need to do it before I talk to Rob. Like I have to do it. Right.
Yeah.
So I went on to the e-color site and did the one, there. I was like, oh, this is neat. Yeah, that's neat because it has to, right? I mean, how can it not?
Well,
You think
and not
about
only
even into
that,
the tools, right? Like certain tools will work better for certain people than others. And just
exactly. You can't tell a very introverted, very process-oriented individual that they're supposed to speak up before they're ready. You have to give them a tool. I mean, we actually created a tool called personal intervention that is what we call the gateway tool. It's just a pause and play button.
Right.
So if I need to speak up and it's not my tendency, I can hit the play button and do that.
Yeah.
And it's a physical act because the physical act connects your brain to the action as opposed to just trying to remember to do it.
Right.
So, we think it's obviously the next logical step in the longer term sustainability of HOP.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. I think it's awesome because even as I did this, like I said, I did this and I went on and I'm like reading through it. I'm like, oh, that's me. I think it's so neat. I think it is so neat. And I think that we're going to see a lot of organizations start to wake up to that and go, okay, this makes total sense.
Yeah,
Right?
every now and then, Fit's been doing human performance for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And we've improved it along the way through companies like Alcoa and John Deere, and we just had a lot of Fortune 500 companies that have used us, and we wanted to maintain Fit human performance because there's clients out there we've had for 10 or 15 years that want to keep that going, that may not want to take that next logical step.
Right.
Almost everything we're doing with clients now is advanced error reduction.
Right.
Is the personality based, and now some of the older clients are coming around to say, what's the next logical step? We're pretty good at this.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Well, I think that's amazing, because you're really supporting your clients in the ways that they need to be supported, right, at the levels in which they're at, and you can
Yeah.
kind of grow that. And that's because I get that question a lot, and I'm sure you do too. They're like, "Well, Hop, what about HPI? And were we throwing everything away?" It's like, no, wait, wait, stop. Right?
Yeah.
It's just, for me, it's kind of, as you just mentioned, just in general, right? It's just this constant evolution towards betterment, right? No matter what pieces kind of come into play there, it's just that stuff. So it's so neat to hear where you guys are taking that. I mean, it's just cool.
Well,
It's
and
just cool.
thank you for that. And the other piece is maybe a quarter, maybe a little bit more of our business comes in the safety door.
Yeah.
Because we don't, at first it was HP, but
Right.
then health physics got mad. So they changed HP health physics to RP, radiation
Yeah.
protection. Then we had HP, but people didn't like that. It needs an O in it. So that became HOP.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing's really changed in
Yeah.
from HP, HBI, HOP.
It's right.
It's all about a continuous improvement process that involves humans, regardless
Exactly.
of what those humans do for a living.
Exactly. Well, and that's what I've seen too, is that it seems like, in a good chunk of organizations, safety might start the conversation, or it might be the catalyst,
Yeah.
and then organizations quickly realize that, oh my God, like this would help us here, and this would help us there, and this would help us practically everywhere in
Yeah.
their
So
organization.
it really eases a burden on safety.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens in a lot of our clients is we come in that safety door, and they gather the plant managers and the VPs together, and they're going to have this meeting. And I say, make sure your quality director's there, your human resources
Mm-hmm.
director's there, your engineering director's there. They say, well, why would all those people be there? I said, because this is an improvement strategy.
Yeah.
And what you're going to see, what they're going to see, is that you may not be able to quantify safety improvements,
Right.
and they're so lagging.
Yeah.
But what do you think your quality director is going to say when they can reduce upsets by a factor of 5 in 3 months?
Yeah. It's massive.
What do you think your finance director is going to say when that factor of 5 reduction in quality upsets can be quantified? So in the end, we go in the safety door, but almost all of our what has it done for you, absent the we make fewer mistakes that result in injuries, are
Right.
financial, big financial.
Yeah, huge, right? And then even beyond that, I mean, you think about, so much of this kind of growth culturally in organizations that stems from this, and just being maybe a little bit better place to work in general.
Yeah. Oh, big
Right,
time.
you think about the reduction in employee turnover and all these kind of other things that really stem from this, and maybe the workplace even just being a little happier.
Well,
Right?
I
It's
mean
like,
that's a big deal, and
yeah,
especially when we brought the personality tendency elements in.
yeah,
So our service and retail side, um, which was developed for that very thing. We have a couple of people that work for us that
yeah,
have service and retail backgrounds, and the service and retail direction we're going is about minimizing turnover and kind of workplace happiness.
yeah,
Because if I can leave someplace and go someplace else and make the same amount of money and think I'm going to be happier, I don't care about the employer. I'm going to go
right,
do that.
yeah,
But
yeah,
if I feel um, good about working here, even
mhm.
if it's the same amount of money, I'll probably stay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And turnover, when we started doing the research, turnover in service and retail is an outrageously
Oh, I'm sure.
expensive thing.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So they can monetize that pretty easily.
Yeah.
So again, we had to start um, creating things in our learning management system that could easily be delivered to
Right.
service and retail, because you're not gonna go into the local pharmacy that is losing people to CVS and have and run 8-hour workshops. That's not going to happen.
Right.
So
Right.
we had to find different ways to deliver,
Yeah.
online, virtually, and things like that. And we had been doing that for, creating that for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And
That's cool. I love it. I love it. I just think it's neat. I mean,
thank you.
again, to see folks out there, I'll put it to you this way: you guys are making the world a better place to work, right? I think that's that's an amazing thing, whether it's safety related or anything else. And I think
Yeah.
that is what's really neat, because out of all those things that we just talked about, safety is probably the hardest one to quantify, right? It's probably the hardest improvement to measure. So once organizations start to realize that they can measure things better elsewhere, they're like, oh, this, they quickly.
And we've had several clients. I won't name the everybody will know who it is, but they do these engagement surveys,
Mm-hmm.
and they have certain they want to improve employee engagement.
Right. Yep.
We've had a couple of clients that blew their next engagement survey out of the water, so that the people that run the engagement surveys had to go back to the well, because the big deal is they create these engagement surveys and they say, hey, here's how you fix that. It's the ancillary product to fix the engagement piece. We had some people that they couldn't really measure the difference.
Yeah.
And so the people that did the engagement survey had to go back to the well to knock those scores down a little. But that employee engagement piece is a precursor to all of the other things getting better.
Yeah.
And the other thing about safety is, even if all your numbers get better, everybody goes to sleep knowing there's that one thing that could happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
Everything we did is gone.
That black swan is always out there.
Yeah.
Right. It's always out there, and it's usually way outside of our imagination. And it's the mystery thing that we know we've missed, or we know we can't imagine, we know that we can't think of, and it's still out there, right? And it's usually in the weirdest places, it seems. But yeah. So tell me about the podcast a little bit. So you've got the Essential Leadership Cycle podcast that happens, right? So tell us a little bit about the pod.
Yeah. Well, I started doing that. I created these things called Robservations a couple of years ago. And
awesome title, by the way. I love it. It's awesome.
I don't know what they're going to call it when I'm gone, but and that really came from people would ask questions. They would just ask me questions and want a short burst answer. And so I started putting those short burst answers. I mean, they were well thought out, but they were just years of experience that anybody could then see. And I wanted something that if somebody's going to, I did one on why kids get left in hot cars.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit controversial because people just want to blame somebody for leaving somebody in a hot car.
Yeah.
And I said, wait a minute, there's a human performance thing about this.
Yeah.
So the Essential Leadership Cycle podcast came out of, we started thinking last September, October timeframe that the leaders that I deal with, I'm almost always with senior leaders now. Right. My heart, where I came from, is operator and maintenance. That's where I came from. Everyone in our organization comes from an operational or maintenance background. Yeah. And but I've spent all of my time with senior leaders over the last 5 or 6 years, maybe even more. Somebody asked me to come do an advocate class for them. I said, I'm not the person. Right. They said, yeah, but it's your stuff. I said, okay, but you want the person that does this, 3 times a month to do this, not me.
Yeah.
And so those senior leaders would ask questions, and I was doing some coaching, both in person and virtual. And somebody said, well, this podcast thing is kicking off. Why don't you help people understand the Essential Leadership Cycle through some quick burst podcasts? And just very quickly, the Essential Leadership Cycle starts with self and team awareness, then moves to shared vision and values. Then you can start to create clear roles and processes. If you don't have those first two, the roles and processes aren't going to be clear. Right. That generates trust in an organization amongst the people and amongst the systems. Once you start to develop trust, then you can go for diversity and inclusion. Once you have that creates commitment and then accountability. And it shocks people how far around the cycle accountability is, but this is accountability where it's developed. I'm accountable to you. You're accountable to me. We're accountable to each other. This is
true sense, right? Yeah.
And I tell people, look, from an accountability perspective, when we go into high performing organizations, they never talk about accountability.
Right.
that doesn't mean it's not there.
Right.
It means that it is organically developed and they're in everything. When I go into organizations that struggle, they talk about it all the time.
And it's always, who are we going to hold?
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. Oh,
So the Essential Leadership Cycle podcast, part of it was, let's step people through what it takes to really get to accountability and learning and continuous improvement. And there's a lot there. So we were realizing that that would reach a lot more people that would just like to listen to 10 or 15 minutes than me going out and saying, okay, now that you're going to deploy senior leaders, here's the model you're going to use. So that's how it started. And, I started by most of the early ones just being me explaining things. And now I'm more, we just created the list today of all of the senior leaders that we're going to interview for it.
That's cool.
A little bit different than me just flapping my gums.
That's cool. So, and I will encourage folks to go check it out, because it is good. Like it's good.
Well, thank you.
It's a good podcast. And to hear that you're going to have those folks on, it's going to go from good to even gooder. How about that?
Gooder.
It is awesome. And it's available just about everywhere, right? iTunes, pretty much anywhere you can find podcasts. So
yeah, I think so. The easiest place to find all of our stuff is just go on our website and click on the either podcast or insights page, and everything's there.
It's awesome. I think it's so cool. It's just, you can sit down and you can have this kind of little bit more longer format conversation, and people eat it up, because they're kind of looking for it, because that's kind of what led me down the podcast space too, is that, okay, I just want to create what I would want to listen to. And I think that's what most of us end up doing when we find ourselves actually doing a podcast, And I think it's great because, again, you have those folks that it's such an intimate experience, because people are usually literally, you're in their ears.
Yeah.
And you're having that conversation directly to that person while they're usually, hanging around the house doing some chores, or they're doing out doing a jog or doing whatever, but you're just connecting with that person so intimately. I just love this.
And you filled a void. So one of the things I appreciate about yours is you filled a void that we were doing the research to fill. Mm-hmm. Because we were having focus groups with millennials. What do you really need? What do you really want? I know you don't want me or Lewis talking to you. So absent that, how do we get what's in this head into something you'll listen to, so that we don't go through this dip of, well, those old people are all full of crap. We're going to do it differently and wind up stepping over some very low-hanging fruit that has been learned over the years.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. And that's where, as we kind of mentioned before, we had this conversation where we kind of get this where it's, okay, so we're throwing all that away, and no, we're not. Stop right there.
Yeah.
Because I don't ever want folks to think that I'm not a burn it down person by any means. And I hope that comes through to folks. I think,
well, it does. And it's important. And there are some people out there that burn it down.
Exactly. I truly believe that, as we continue to grow and try to seek betterment, we're standing on the shoulders of folks like yourself. We're standing on the shoulders of folks that have grown and learned and built this. And as you said, we need to lean into the knowledge that folks such as yourself possess, and others out there, right? That I don't want to be ageist here and call you the grandfather of this stuff, but you get what I'm saying, right?
No, but I mean, we kind of look at it as there's explorers, mm-hmm. and then there's settlers, and then there's the population, right?
Right.
And one of the things that we've tried to constantly do is explore, mm-hmm. so that the information is there and available. And I don't feel 63. I'm hoping I don't look it yet, but some mornings I do feel it. But anyway,
I was thinking you were like 30s, like mid.
Thanks. Well, I was at one time.
At one time, there you go.
But we do keep surrounding ourselves with people who have to use it, that are in the younger generation. Mm-hmm. We know I'm not their papa. There's a certain group that I need to talk to, but by the same token, there's some mistakes that have been made along the way that keep getting propagated.
Right.
So things like the performance modes. You know, my first book is going to be on the performance modes.
Nice.
I'm 400 pages into my first book on
Oh,
Is It Reasonable to Believe.
you're getting
But
me excited now. We're gonna get a book. I'm getting excited.
well, I'm 400 pages into a 200-page book, so
Uh,
now I've got to figure out how to back out of it. But Todd has really told me, look, we understand performance modes and the failure of people to understand those performance modes probably better than anyone. And that now that it's being sent out to a bunch more people, the numbers that people are using in performance modes, they're just wrong. They're not what the research said. They make people believe that I don't need to use a tool to reduce I don't need a tool to go from 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 10,000. What I need a tool for.
Right.
So, you know, people have to understand that some of the mistakes that the piece of star that wasn't working, you know, people need to understand that piece.
Yeah. No, I think that's so vital, and that's where I share that all the time. It's continued growth. You don't want to just burn stuff down.
Yeah.
It's still, even if we're gonna, like we're saying hop, it's still human performance improvement at the end of the day, right? That's still ultimately what we're talking about, right? We might just be adding in some different pieces, but that doesn't mean you scrap all the stuff that's known and good and works and all that other stuff. And I think that's something that that I'm fearful of as we kind of continue to seek betterment, right? Is that we excise things that we don't need to excise, that we cut out things that are valuable and work and are useful. So I think you're spot on. You're spot on there. We want to make sure that we don't lose that stuff that is valuable to us. And
well, and the other thing is the gatherings that we have, even conversations like this,
right,
or some of the safety FM stuff that's gone on, some of the gatherings. At some point, HPRCT, which I think you've been to, right?
Yeah.
The reason we're there is to make sure that some of this stuff gets moved so that it can be improved,
right,
as opposed to, well, nobody's talking about that. And that's exactly what the nuclear industry did with performance modes. They threw them out the window.
I know.
People don't even know that. What the hell? It was one of the most important researches in understanding human performance.
Exactly. And I've found myself in a few situations similar, right, where I'm going, what's missing? Where you know, and you're looking at some of these presentations, right, when you're talking kind of basics, human performance improvement, again, the basics, you still got to have that to build any of the rest of this stuff off of, right?
Yeah.
So you're going, okay, where are the performance modes? Right, as you kind of mentioned. And when you ask, like, oh, we scrapped that, we save the slides for something else.
That's just theory. Performance modes are theory, for crying out loud.
Exactly.
If I scratch my head because I can't figure out how to put the damn IKEA furniture together, that's performance modes.
Right, exactly. There you go. Exactly. Well, and so fortunately, at least in the little sphere of my little bubble of influence and my little bubble of contact with people, I've seen them starting to rally back in a lot of organizations, at least, because I think folks are going, whoa, we probably need to not throw that away.
Yeah,
that's pretty good. And as you said, we've seen that in the nuke world where it just kind of went.
Well, I think part of that was back in the day. It was probably late 90s that I started using something called triggers. Performance modes didn't mean a lot, and even the traps didn't mean a lot, because you didn't know what the triggers were that told you were vulnerable. So we started putting triggers in, and the triggers then actually became as important, if not more important, than the vulnerability itself, because the trigger would tell you needed to do something.
Right.
But before, when you stress, high workload, and time pressure, those are traps. Don't fall in them. You succumbed to time pressure. Well, how was I supposed to know I was in it at the moment? That's what triggers do.
Right. And that's exactly so. And because so many of those conversations, right? You know, you've had them thousands of times too. It's like, well, duh, I have time pressure. Look at my job.
Yeah.
Of course it exists, right?
It's the leaders that need to be told, you can't take the trap away.
Exactly.
You can't take the thing that pushes stress away.
No.
You got to give somebody the ability to recognize it, and then the opportunity to deal with it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we call that moving from empowering to enabling.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And a lot of organizations, they just stop at empowering people.
Right.
And I think it's not enough. You have
It's
to
not
enable
exactly.
people to do the
Exactly.
right thing.
Because so many of those conversations are just conversations, right? It ends up with
Yeah.
a listen, there's no time pressure here. Don't give me that excuse. There's no time pressure here.
Yeah.
Right. And everybody's looking at each other going, oh, yes, we know
You've
this.
always got time to do the job right. You've always got time to do the job safety. We're never going to ask you to do something
Right.
so fast that you need to make a mistake, and I need you done by 4.
Exactly. Yeah. I love it. Spot on, because then everyone else is in their minds, because most of us have been in that situation, right? At some point in their careers, we're going, liar.
Yeah. Well, and so let's go back to the personality tendencies again. Each of the different traps actually get set differently for different personality types.
Wow.
So
Yeah,
you're on that right hand side. You're on the relating socializer piece.
right.
We that are on that right hand side, one of the traps that we set for people is over information. So it will actually stress people out if we over inform, because we're trying to engage. We're engagers.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, it's so interesting. I love it because, yeah, exactly.
And we don't like voids either.
No.
So somebody, if we're on a pre-task brief and the people are thinking, which they need time to do, those relators and thinkers, they need time to process information. We'll fill that void with information that they may or may not need.
Right.
Or we'll just say, hey, look, we got it. Let's go. We're ready to go.
Yeah. That's so valuable. Oh, I love it. I love it. We come full circle. We brought it all the way back to the colors. I love it. That's so good. Yeah. And I think it's just demonstrating the value that has. And I'm so excited to see where you guys take it next. I think I'm excited. And I'm sitting here listening to you talk about this book. I'm excited. I really am. I'm pumped for this. You're going to have to hustle up and get it out to us now. You realize that, right?
I shouldn't have said it out loud on somebody else's podcast, because I know there's people sitting in the office next to mine that said, I heard that. You had the whole damn COVID to write the book. And other things. Now, how long did it take you to write it? When you sat down, how long did it take you to write it?
Oh, for mine. So mine's a shorty though. So I'll say that. Let me say that, because mine is only about 110 pages. So mine was a shorty, and I'd already written a couple articles around it. I already had everything there, and it was more, mine is more of an opinion piece, really, than anything else. Personal experiences, storytelling, and it's more of that. So mine took me probably about 4 months to really sit down and scrub mine out.
So very much like you, I think I've got everything written down somewhere, and now it's put in probably 100 pages ish is probably what the performance mode book. Performance mode book's going to be very directed at hop people.
Yeah.
But
it's
because
needed.
that's the only people who are paying attention to performance mode. But the bigger book, the Is It Reasonable to Believe, is my working title. It's going to be about improvement in general.
I'm excited. I'm excited. I'm a book person, if you can't tell from. I'm excited. Yeah. I'm excited. Yeah. So, and that's what I would say.
Whether you raise your stack or lower your chair.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm pretty short, so this is what I use. I kind of sit on these if I need to. For those folks listening, they're like, "What's he talking about?" Yeah. But yeah, it's for me. I found that when I actually sit down and wrote the manuscript itself, it didn't take that long. It probably took me, in all honesty, probably about a month of just getting a first draft out. But then the rest of it was just reading and proofreading. Yeah. And you still miss a ton of stuff. Like I'm already sitting here in a printed copy going, okay, so that's, but it was that. And then I went the full self-publish route and just went through, that whole exercise. You know how this stuff is. You kind of go out and you self-teach and you figure it out. So a good majority of that was just doing that stuff and then passing around copies of it and going, hey, read this for me. So the whole process was probably about 4 months, but I enjoyed it. And I'm sitting here going, oh, I'm so glad it's done.
I mean, both Sydney and Todd have been on my butt for a while. I think Todd's tired of poking me. But the thing is, I'm now starting to get requests to publish all of the observations in a book form or in
That
some
would
kind
be
of
cool.
ebook. Um,
So
so I mean, we got 40 or 50 of them, so it
I'm
wouldn't be.
telling you,
Uh,
I think that would be cool. I'm sitting here, I see it, that would
it,
be cool.
it's a big shift for me. I mean,
Yeah.
I've probably never said this on open mic before, but I always want to provide value, and my fear is that I won't be providing value. And
Right.
I don't. I'm talking value in something somebody can start using tomorrow.
Right.
That's always somewhere, not even in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
So I think my fear of publishing these things is that people won't see the value in it. But
Right.
I guess I just got to get over it.
Well, I will tell you that's one thing for sure, because that's one thing when I wrote this the first kind of pass of the manuscript and I read it, I was happy with it, and I have that same kind of bug, and I'm going, I don't know if I'm going to release this or not. I don't know, right? I just kind of fell into this little trap, and it was a trap. It was a little trap of self doubt there for a little bit with it, and then once I was like, okay, I'll pass this around and let me see what some peers think about it.
Yeah.
And when I as soon as I passed it around, it was print this, So it's just that I think that for me personally, I find that I'm probably more critical on myself with that than anyone else ever could be, right?
That's
So
what I'm
once,
told.
right,
Same. And
yeah,
again, that's a personality tendency element,
yeah, exactly, yeah,
especially for relators
yeah,
that we get pretty hard on ourselves, because if it winds up that it's not relatable to somebody, it's on me.
right, exactly.
But I appreciate that you jumped off that cliff and did it. I think it's great.
Well, that's what I found with it is I was like, okay, somebody's just like, just pull the trigger, just do it.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, and I've been fortunate enough, as with most folks that find themselves in this weird, wonky world of safety or performance or anything, right? We all have a mentor at some point. I've been fortunate enough to have some pretty decent mentors that kind of point me in the. They'll call my BS really quick if it
Yeah.
is, and they'll shoot me straight, But so, and that's the other piece I wanted to touch on before we get ready to wrap up. I know I've kept you for about an hour now, a little over an hour now. Is you've been doing these walks and talks, and I think they're awesome.
Oh
These
man,
little
I was
videos
wondering if
are
anybody had even seen one yet. I
so
didn't even know if they were publishing.
they're so cool. I'm no joke. I love it. It's to me, right? And it's when you have somebody that it's just an intimate moment, right? You grab the phone. I'm assuming you're shooting them on your phone, and
Yeah.
you're just walking and you're having a quick conversation and talk about adding value. Those little snippets.
I really
I was
appreciate
watching the
that.
one where you're talking about walking up the hills on the road, not just the other day, and I'm like,
Yeah.
it's just cool. It's relatable. It's raw. I love it. It's just good. That's what
Well,
I
man,
wanted
I
to throw
really
those out
appreciate
there.
that because I do want things that people that may not be my age will still
Mhm.
watch, and are short. It'll keep their attention span. So I'm trying to
Right.
listen to what
Yeah.
people really want.
Yeah.
But by the same token, what I was discovering, and I think I said it in my intro, was that I was I think a lot.
Mhm.
I get ideas in the shower. Get ideas in the
Mhm.
middle of the night, and I get
Yep.
ideas
Yep.
when I walk or when I
Yep.
exercise.
Yep.
And I would get back and I would think, man, I'm pretty sure I had a good idea while I was walking.
Right.
I can't for the life of me
Right.
remember
I
what
know
it
what
was.
yeah.
So I said, well, I'm just going to record this and,
Mhm.
and see what came up with. But then
Yeah.
I don't know whether this one's been published or not, but one of the early ones, my we have a rule that you're not allowed to tell a story in a workshop unless it's been vetted by the person that it's about.
There you
So
go.
if you say, "Oh, my daughter did this" or "My son did this,"
Yep.
you can't do that unless it's vetted. So my wife and I were walking along, and I said, "Hey, can I tell this story on a walk and talk?" She said, "What's a walk and talk?" I said, "Well, it's this thing out here." So I vetted that story, and I said, "You know what? I think probably a walk and talk that people need to hear is about vetting your stories."
Mhm.
Because what happened was when we were much younger, I told a story in a human performance class, And that story was bastardized by somebody that then told somebody that told their wife that was in the church group with us.
Oh,
And the wife of the third generation person told this story that was not even close to what happened. It
oh
really made
no.
my wife and kids look bad. I said,
Yeah.
whoa, 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 that wasn't what I said. I said, well, yeah, but that's what everybody's hearing.
Yeah. Oh no.
And
Yeah.
that created the rule. We have two rules when we certify trainers. Number one, no stories from here. You cannot tell local stories
Right.
because somebody
Right.
in the room is going to think they know more about that than you do. And
Absolutely.
number two, you got to get permission from your family if you're going to talk about
I like it. Those now that is some word. Those are words of wisdom right there. I love it. Spot on.
it. And, you know, it's just those things that I was
Oh,
young
that's
and
so
dumb, and I'm a storyteller, you know. So
same. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's how many of us learn too, right? We have to go
yeah,
out and learn. I for one, it's like I insist on learning the hard way. Right.